for a light. Thank you.
Of the light? No, no, we'll wait.
Good evening. Just to be careful. I have been informed and also once noticed that when people come from the door, there is a step down, and it's easy to get unbalanced. So just look your steps when you come down here. Tomorrow morning is the devotional meeting at 9:30 a.m. And that is mentioned in the program that it is at Bharata Samaj temple, opposite Shiva temple. As much as I have understood, it is behind this wall. And the entrance is on your right side there to go in. Are there any Varanasi people who know otherwise? It is right, okay. So those who go to the devotional meeting tomorrow morning, 9:30 a.m., go there a bit early, 5-10 minutes earlier, and walk that entrance to the back of this wall. Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and start. Okay, good evening, everyone. On this very first evening of 2020, good evening. It's been a long day, and I know very often the evening programs can be a little bit demanding, but I want you to hang in there with us. I want to tell you some things about Adyar, and we're going to do that in just a moment. I do find, though, that since coming here, I have received so much help, and so many of the people who are making this happen remain unseen to most of us. So I know even backstage here, we have our Bharat scouts and guides who have been enormously helpful. And I just would like for you to see some of them and ask them to come on out, and you can appreciate them as well. It's a group of young guys here who have been helping with everything. They've taught me the salute, so 3 fingers up. All right, these are our Bharat India. This is the future here, so thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Okay. There you go. So I want to talk with you a little bit about an update about things that are going on at the international headquarters in Chennai, Adyar. So it's something where many of you are aware that Adyar is a very large campus. particularly to be in the middle of a city of 7 million people, such as Chennai, Adyar comprises about 260 acres of land, quite a bit of land, particularly to be in an urban area. And as you all know, first of all, let me ask, how many of you have not been to Adyar? Could you put your hands up? And again, I realize everybody here does not necessarily understand my accent or even speak my language, but okay, very few of you have not been to Adyar. So you're aware that in terms of the greenery associated with our campus, in the city of Chennai, the Adyar campus is regarded as one of the two lungs, like our lungs of the city. There is Adyar, and then there is the Gindi National Forest, both of which are within the city. And they're described as the lungs because they are where so much of the fresh air, the air that is the carbon dioxide that is processed by the plants there, gives back pure oxygen. And so it's something that is of great benefit to the city of Chennai and is recognized in that way. So we have maintained the place. The better portion of the property is still forest. I have to say, though, that when you look at some of the old pictures of the Adyar campus, for instance, because I'm frequently in touch with matters archival, I get to see photos of when many of these buildings were being constructed. Leadbeater Chambers, which is our most recent project and we'll talk about, was built 110 years ago. And of course, it's surrounded by lush trees and greenery today. But when it was built, you can see pictures taken from far away. And around it, there were no trees. But now, nature has been allowed to take its course, and we have a forested area. The same is true with the other buildings. That's something that has been a beauty and has also been a problem in terms of human constructions. So that's something that has been driving a good deal of our maintenance and a good deal of our repair work. Just to give you a little bit of background also, our Adyar campus has for its entire lifetime been completely self-sufficient in terms of water. There are 29 wells all around the property, giving varying qualities of water, but we've always been able to provide water for ourselves and have never had to draw on the municipal systems. Of course, with the changing nature of the weather, not only in Varanasi, but also in Chennai and around the world, what used to be normal at this point is still being determined what is in fact normal weather anywhere in the world. About 3 years ago, we had rains in Chennai that were historic in their proportion. I remember being there at the time and late at night hearing the thunder. This was during the monsoon season, and it started to rain, and it kept raining. And in the course of that one day, we had 20 inches of rain. One day. The water rose, took in a number of the buildings, rose, threatened even our archives building. But it was a deluge. Wind the clock forward a couple of years, and for about 2 years we've missed the monsoon. So we've had very limited rains. What that has meant is that we've had to reassess our water independence. This year, we have had to re-engineer some of the infrastructure in order to remain independent in water, because water was in such demand that all over the city of Chennai, people were having to buy water in order to provide for condominiums, apartment buildings, even businesses. So these are the sorts of things that we have to think into the future as we move ahead, and those are the things that we're dealing with. But a lot of different things going on at our campus. As you know, for about the last 5 years, let's wind the clock back. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I was first coming into this position as international president, there were a couple of things that were eminently clear. One of the foremost among those was the fact that on our campus in Adyar, we had a number of just beautiful buildings, heritage buildings, that had been constructed with great care, many of them in the typical Madras style of architecture, which technologically was a brilliance that became forgotten. We'll talk a little bit about that. But we had these wonderful structures. But as I say, as a result of the encroachment of the natural world onto the human-made world, we were starting to have some problems. As theosophists, among many, there was the thought that nature, with its patterns, should remain undisturbed. And so that's a way of thinking that has certain predictable consequences. One of which is that the trees continue to grow, the buildings don't move away, but the trees get closer and closer, to the point that in some of the buildings, the trees were growing onto the buildings. And so we had to establish a certain different way of viewing it. One of which is that there's a wisdom in nature, and yes, nature is to be respected, but nature also is aware that those buildings were there before the trees were. And so in that sense, we communicate to the trees that there's a certain perimeter in which we all live together quite peacefully. And so a certain pruning process has been involved, and then there's been a great restoration to the buildings. But 6 years ago, when I was first coming to Adyar, I stopped at the Netherlands, the Theosophical Society in the Netherlands. And they have there the International Theosophical Center and a long history of deep involvement in the work of the Theosophical Society. While there, I was there for the first time. Actually, one of the revelations of becoming international president was that, in fact, I'm also head of the ITC in the Netherlands. That's something it would be nice if they told you before, but having heard it, you take on what comes with that. But while there, I had a chance to meet and talk with a gentleman I had never met before. His name is Michiel Haas. And we talked, and it took probably about 10 minutes to realize that we were very similarly linked in terms of a view to the needs in terms of maintenance and renovation at Adyar. The difference between my thinking and his is, in fact, that he is a highly trained environmental architect. I knew he was good at what he did, but it's only as we started to work together that I became aware. Michiel is a little bit too modest, this is one thing. So in a way, he was supposed to be here today to give this presentation. He couldn't come from the Netherlands this time. He's sorely missed. But I came to become more aware of his status in the architectural community when the King of the Netherlands, which that was also a revelation. I didn't even know there was a king in the Netherlands. But the King in the Netherlands knighted Michiel for the work that he had done in the field of environmentally sustainable architecture. So this is the point of view that has been brought to many of these projects that we are engaged in. What I'd like to do now is share with you a PowerPoint that will be an update on some of the projects that we have been involved with very recently. 5 years ago, we developed a plan for, everybody talks in terms of 5-year plans. So we said, okay, let's do a 5-year plan. And we did it. We identified specific buildings that were very important because of their usage and because of their historical nature that were going to be the targets of our initial renovation project. We started to try and work in that direction. We raised the money to do that. Along the way, we encountered a number of obstacles, and just in the interest of being completely transparent, honest, a conversation that I had on more than one occasion when we looked ahead at the things we had targeted as the projects we wanted to undertake. I found myself on more than one occasion talking to the team of people that was involved and saying that really the things that we are envisioning it's impossible. The infrastructure, the support network, the finances, all of the things that are required along this line, it wasn't there, it wasn't apparent. But always after saying it's impossible, we would end those meetings by saying, it's impossible, but now let's go do it. We recognize it, and it's always more satisfying when you do something that's impossible. And plus, the beauty of it is, even if it didn't happen, everyone would recognize it was impossible to do. But at this point, what has happened is that we're about to close out that 5 years, and we will have completed every single one of those impossibilities at the close of this time. Additionally, there will be a number of other projects that we took on also that have been completed that were even unexpected. So what I'll be showing you this evening is just what the things are that are the most recent. And now, of course, I find myself in this position of asking for the next 5 years. What is it that will be at least equally, hopefully more impossible than the previous ones, so that we can again be quite satisfied with meeting and greeting impossibility. So if you could get the lights, we'll share what it is that we've done. And this is Michiel's PowerPoint program. Michiel, I have asked him, I think the title we came up with for him was creative consultant or something like that. Yeah, good lights. And so I always ask Michiel to just throw in something of his own that's completely outside of the box as some thoughts that he might have for the future. Often his thinking has gotten me in trouble because we have these meetings and people will see something like Michiel at one point was saying what we need to do, it would be very nice to have a cafe in the Blavatsky Bungalow. And then I got letters from around the world saying, what is this? The spirituality of Adyar is being violated, no cafe. It was just an idea. Ideas are only harmful if you ongoing renovation of leadbeater chambers, and also the recent move of the archives to the Adyar Library and Research Complex. We're going to talk a little bit about a 5-year plan for the future, which includes some of these items. Some of these are already well underway, and then some other plans. So let's go. Probably I would go better if I didn't turn it off. Okay. We seem to be repeating. I'm sure it's has something to do with the dark. Okay. And then the Elephant's newsletter, which is a newsletter that goes out specifically about renovations at Adyar. All right, so the first 5-year plan, Blavatsky Bungalow. This is Blavatsky Bungalow shortly after its completion. This was a project that actually went on for about a year and a half. Blavatsky Bungalow is something that came to the Theosophical Society. It was donated to the TS by members. Even though it's called Blavatsky Bungalow, Blavatsky never stayed there. It was only in 1907 that the property became the property of the Theosophical Society. And of course, HPB had passed in 1891. But it was a building that required extensive research. It was not extensive renovation. It was the first major project that we undertook. And in doing these things, you always learn. This here is one of the learning experiences. Because when we started the building, we quickly found that there were issues with the foundation. Pretty much all of the issues that we face at the buildings there at Adyar relate to water. It's a very humid place. There's a lot of rain. The campus borders the Adyar River, which at this point has become quite polluted, and then also the Bay of Bengal. So there is salt, a great deal of salt in the air, and so infiltration of water has been one of the main issues with the buildings. And in part, over the years, the way in which we as the Theosophical Society have approached its maintenance has also created problems. When these buildings were built, as I said, there was a technology that was so beautifully suited to this particular area. I mean, there are roofs that are called Madras-style roofs. All of these buildings were built using not concrete, but lime plaster. And the difference between concrete and lime plaster is that lime plaster breathes. So it takes in water, but then it breathes it out. So the constant draw of water from the ground, from the roofs, actually became utilized as a method of cooling inside of these buildings. There was a constant respiration that went on. Over the years, as new and improved technologies became available, we adopted them. And so where there were repairs needed to the lime plaster, we put in the wonder material of concrete. Looks the same, a little bit more permanent. Why not? Well, over the years, all the many patches that we did with concrete actually interrupted the flow of the water. So whereas before water was being taken up, being breathed out, cooling the people in the buildings, now it was stopped. And it pooled in different areas of the building and degraded it. So every bit of concrete had to be removed. Equally, we found that the foundation was a shallow foundation, and so that had to be completely, there was an injection of fly ash and other things that had to be done. This is an example of where the concrete had to be removed. The beams that supported the roof and the floors, teak wood beams, beautiful. This is what had become of them. From water, they had rotted. Many of them, the rot wasn't even apparent until you started to go into them and take a look. And that was what was supporting the roofs and the balustrades. So new wood beams had to be fashioned and put in place. We had workmen who came specifically from Kerala for this. Apparently this is something of a specialty there. Did it again. I have told all of the people that in the future, this is the roof, in the future, whenever we are doing a plan for building renovation, that whatever figure is quoted to us for the roof and whatever timeline is given to us for a roof, we need to minimally increase it by 20 to 50%. When you start dealing with these madras roofs, as you see, what you have is tiles. The entire roof is built up of tiles. So it's not made to be waterproof in the sense that we think of Western roofs. It's made to allow the water to sink to a certain depth and no farther, and then to evaporate, again cooling the building inside. Again, our technologies, we put in concrete, we put on tar sheets, degraded everything. So entire roofs had to be taken out and then replaced. But now it's back with these beautiful madras tiles, just like this. So that was the process. And here's what we got out of it. Beautifully restored building. In fact, there is absolutely no doubt the building as we have it now is in far superior condition to its 1907 condition. Beautifully restored place, completely in use for programs such as the School of the Wisdom. Leadbeater Chambers was the next big building that we were going to undertake. That's in process now. Leadbeater Chambers, as many of you know, particularly for those who come from abroad, Annie Besant constructed this building with it in mind that it would be the place where people coming from abroad would come to stay, to study, to attend conventions. It is, in its previous condition, it was 30 rooms, large rooms, front to back. And it was the very first building of its type to be built in all of southern India. This is a concrete and reinforced concrete building, so concrete and steel. So all of these pillars that support the building have steel inside, and then they're covered with concrete. This was a new form of construction in 1910 for southern India. Beautiful building, but 110 years later, we encountered certain problems. So we decided at this point to redo, and redo with more of a mind toward the needs of today. So in place of the very large rooms such as this, where as many as 8, maybe even 10 people would share a room with one bathroom, we're dividing it into 2 rooms. So each of these rooms, whereas before it was one, will have a separate bath, separate kitchenette area, where people can come and have not so much a private room, because they can open if you want to, that's possible. But this is the new redesign. And this is the new floor plan. So that's in progress as we speak. This is a closer view of what the room would look like, its dimensions. In September or October of this year. Part of the reason why we are here in Varanasi now is because this construction we knew would take a year or more. And the Indian section was generous enough and really more than willing to host the conference here. And so we're very thankful for that, so we can get this construction completed. Whereas before, many of you are aware, there were staircases that came up this way. Those are being removed, and we will have the staircases on each end, which will give you access to the floors. It's going to be a beautiful building in very short order. Just an idea of the work that's going on. The building had to be completely scaffolded, obviously, and the front had to be basically destroyed. We had to make it very ugly in order to make it quite pretty. This is an example of some of the work. Each of these columns have these steel supports inside. Many of them, the columns had to be completely torn apart because the water infiltration causes the steel to oxidize, to rust. And when that happens, then the columns become dangerous for supporting the building. We knew that that was the case with some columns, but as the construction work continued, we found that it was many, many of them. These particular ones did not have to be completely rebuilt, but in some of them, pockets of air had developed. And so we injected a grout-like material that could fill those empty spaces and make these perfectly good for many, many years to come. Again, because of the water damage, you had supports that were compromised in various places. The bathrooms that are being constructed, the additional bathrooms that are going to be added, come from a staircase. Many of you who have been to LBC are probably unaware that there was this staircase on two sides that was never used, but we took it out completely and used the space that it occupied in order to add the extra kitchenette space and bathroom space to the building. So again, this is a view of the construction of the stairway, which now is completely done. The railings will match these. Just a view of some of the materials that have been required. A lot of brick. One of the things that we did in dividing the rooms was to use the space in between. We have about a 3-foot space, about a 1 meter space that is separating the buildings. We have that 1 meter space because we also have an air vent that will be going through there, pulling air from all of the rooms. One of the things that you do lose in dividing the rooms is the airflow that used to be there from back to front. So to compensate for that, we are having a vent that will be in this space, but also it provides for a closet space between what was the old room here and now this is what it will look like. It doesn't show here, but on this side of the wall, there will be a space for a desk. So you get a little idea of what it will look like. This same closet will be on both sides, so this will be here, and then on the other side of the wall, the same thing. This is the roof, and again, it was no surprise when we found that we had to do much more work to the roof than we had anticipated. This is the idea of the tile work that was on the roof, layer after layer after layer of tile, which had become compromised. This is what it will look like when we're through. We're obviously going to replace the roof, but we are also going to be installing solar panels for the electrical needs, not only of Leadbeater Chambers, but of many of the surrounding buildings on the campus. There will also be solar hot water. As all of you who have been there know, we used to have a very Spartan sort of approach to things, so cold water was the norm. I think it made us hardier theosophists, but now, unfortunately, you will all be spoiled because there will be hot water in every room. Also, the top floor, for the present, we're going to have air conditioning on the top floor, which is the hottest floor. We'll see how that goes ahead, and then there's also the possibility for the same thing on every floor. So that's Leadbeater Chambers. And it wouldn't be McKeel's presentation if he didn't mention their sponsors are still welcome. And there's a big heart showing that you will be loved even more. So to sponsor one room, 5,000 US dollars, 3.5 lakh, 4.5 euro, and then it's one room, and we are going to commemorate the rooms to the donors of such type. These are some of the people who have already made donations toward that. 60 rooms will be there in total. 24 rooms have been sponsored, although that has increased since he did this. So the other thing, the archives. As of right now, the archives is completely transferred from its old place in the headquarters building. I think I told you that at the time of the flooding in Adyar, the archives building is actually, it's within the headquarters building, and it's probably a total of 2 meters distance from the shore of the Adyar River. So during the flooding, the river continued to rise daily. And the river rose up the side of this building. Fortunately, there are several steps going up, but it rose to the point that we became concerned that if it rose any farther, it was going to flood the archives room. What that would mean is that anything at a lower level in that room, or any of the items at all that could be damaged by extreme humidity, would be affected. At that time, we took everything that was near floor level and had shifted up. My office was filled with things, everything that you could move, we moved. Fortunately, it stopped shortly before it came to that area. But this is the old archives area. Originally, archives as an official function, the TS, I think really began about 50 years after the TS was founded. Obviously, when an organization is new and there are many different concerns, recording your history when you're first trying to even make a history didn't occur to many. So we started to build the archives over time, and now it's something that is rather extensive. So, you know, Almira by Almira, it has expanded. It now includes all sorts of manuscripts, letters, many of a very historical nature, letters from Gandhi, letters from many, many different people are found in our archives. And it has objects, works of art, phenomenally produced objects, many, many things. So this is the archives as it existed. Initially, we had thought to build a separate building and connect it to the Adyar Library. Always we were going to connect it to the Adyar Library Center to make it a full research center, not just a library, not just the 45,000 palm leaf manuscripts that this unique library resource houses, but also the archives. As it is now, we have people from all around the world consulting our archives. And every year in countries that you wouldn't even imagine, books are coming out related to the Theosophical Society's impact on the history of movements as diverse as social reform, arts. All of you who have seen the Thought Forms exhibit, if you have not seen it, I would encourage you to go and see it, because those images that you will see hanging on the wall right across behind us are powerful in the sense that a great deal of what has become the modern art movement was really spawned through those images and that work. But many of these things of that sort we have in our archives. So after we decided that a separate building was not required because we had a very large space that had been utilized for storage, which was here, within the Adyar Library, those of you who have been there will know that you come in the front, and if you walk straight through, there's a beautiful lily pond here. And then over here was a neglected area that was used really just for storage. We've claimed that area for the archives, and we completely redeveloped it. Now it's something that is, it is air-conditioned, it is humidified, it is protected from ultraviolet rays, and so our archives has moved there. Again, this is some of the images of the previous archives. The work that went on in the space that was designated for the head of our archives, Jayashri Kannan, and this is a co-worker who works there with her, Veda. And this is the new archives. Old archive, no. Old archives, new archives. So all of the new almirahs have been installed, and there's room, as you can tell, for quite a bit of growth in terms of what we do. There are research areas, there are areas for copying, there's an external office. All of these things have been added to our archives. And as the archives grows, it's also possible to replace any of these almirahs with these rolling units that can compress it into quite a small space. So for the future, part of what I ask for when we go into any of these projects is that I would very much like for it to be something that will be a benefit to the future at the minimum. But probably I should say at the minimum, it should be something that during the course of my lifetime, I will not have to be concerned with. So all of these projects are things that will certainly outlive us here. And so we always have to think for the future of what the society is and will become. It is now named the Surendra Narayan Archives, whereas before it was just archives. Many of you know Surendra Narayan. He was a very long time supporter and officer within the Theosophical Society. He served as vice president. He also served as general manager. He was treasurer at one point. Really a wonderful man in terms of the TS. And his family really very much wanted to have something by which his name could be remembered. So it is the Surendra Narayan Archives. When we have our convention at Adyar next year, all of you, I will expect to go when we open this place up for a tour for you to see. So that's the first 5-year plan. We did all of that. We did the headquarters building, we did Raja House, and then we did the projects that we showed. Equally, we did a lot of infrastructure work, replacing the plumbing for the entire campus, a lot of electrical work. So a lot of things have gone on. So there are a number of things we have in mind for this. We're looking to do some projects that will involve new building necessarily, and a lot of renovation projects as well. Certainly we have a need now, and have for a long time, for an info center. It wouldn't be McKeel if he didn't add the aspect of a vegan cafe and restaurant. So an info center, because so many people every single day come to our campus, and they get a chance to walk through, they get a chance to see, but really we need to do more to make it possible for some people who come to appreciate the nature of the place they're coming to. There is a great deal of history that is there, and also the theosophical movement itself, to acquaint people with that. So that's something we're in the process of working with right now. Many of you will be aware that we have started a school there, because we are aware that there are many schools around the world, there are many schools that have been theosophical schools, and that really a theosophical education is something that necessarily involves more than a recognition of the concepts of theosophy or the history and names of famous people, but that someone, in order for us to have something that is of benefit, really it has to be something where the children that will become the adults in this world are equipped with certain tools for self-awareness, not with concepts, not with doctrines, but with those tools which really connect you with your own humanity and the humanity of others. So the ability to actually become aware of and to interact with the things that really direct our lives mostly, which is to say our emotions, our thoughts, our desires over which many of us feel we have no control, to give children means to interact with that in the ways that are most meaningful for them. It's something that we never got, but it's something that we want to be sure that we have an aware youth coming into the world. So that school has started in June, and that's something that will be continuous up until it's reached the 12th grade. It will necessarily be a relatively small school. About 400 students is the target for that. Renovation of the new quadrangle, the beach houses, and the Parsi quarters. New accommodations for delegates, Vasanta guest house with approximately 60 apartments. Again, these are, at this point, these are dreams, and then we're going to bear down on what it is we're actually going to do. Better connection between Blavatsky, which is to say the side where the school and the TPH is, and the Besson Garden. And then we have definitely going to continue on deferred maintenance of buildings and infrastructure. That's ongoing. So new info center. There are two gates to the building, as you know. One is called the main gate, which is over, no, this way. Where are we? Well, anyway, the main gate is over here. The south gate is along Besant Avenue. And actually, probably more people come through the south gate than what we call the main gate. And so we're looking to put our info center near that gate. So as people come in, they would be able to get some sort of bearing on Theosophical Society and the place. This just gives you some perspective about where these things are. The library, and by the library will be the, right here is where the new archives is. This is where the info center is, the school, Vasanta. So this is a vision of what the info center might look like. Cafe sort of space, place to sit down and think and have exchanges of conversation, exhibition, reception. Probably with this model, we would think in terms of shifting the bookstore from where it is now to here. So a further visualization. The Adyar Theosophical Academy, which is the new school, which has just started this year, went into the space where the Theosophical Publishing House used to be. Many of you remember, as you know, it was just across the road from the main body of the Theosophical Society. And it was something that had been very, very active for many years. It still is, but with the changes in the publishing industry, certainly the level of staffing and storage and things that had been involved in the publishing business are no longer required. So this building was something that was severely underutilized. And so we decided that if we were going to start a school somewhere, we would put it in this formidable building and repurpose it for the school. We moved the Theosophical Publishing House to the Vasanta Press area, and it functions there quite well. Now it looks like this. So from this to this. It's beautiful. The space inside has been done in a very wonderful way, so that it's very suitable for classes, open space. So this is just for the first grades now. I think it goes up to second grade at the moment. There's a wonderful sort of amphitheater space that is out in the back. A lot of it is designed, part of the educational concept is that nature is a great teacher, if not the greatest teacher. And so all of the campus here is open to the natural world. The banyan tree is right behind it. And so it's something where the children have interaction with the natural world every single day that they go to school. So they don't become disconnected in the way that most people living in cities do. This is a view of the inside of the new school. But as I said, the school, it's going to be more than just the first two grades, so we're going to have to, over the next few years, add on to the existing space that's there. So this is the space now that it encompasses. So an additional space is contemplated to be built here. That's something that will be happening this year. New quadrangle. You know, part of the thing that we have at the Theosophical Society's campus is we have Leadbeater Chambers, and Leadbeater Chambers has always been, it was even Annie Besant's intent that for people who come from abroad, that's the place they need to stay. So in a sense, we have always had not a two-tier concept of accommodations, but accommodations that were different in nature. I would like to very much blur or remove any sort of line that would say there are Indian and then there are Western accommodations. So one of the projects that we're going to be undertaking in the very near future is a renovation work to New Quadrangle. This is it as it exists now. Beautiful building, but not perhaps, but in need of renovation. So this is how it's envisioned. So one of the things that will be added, of course, the room design will be shifted internally. We'll be putting the closets in. But we're also thinking we'll be putting men's and women's washrooms, new ones in this largely unutilized courtway. And then upgrading the rooms as well. The beach houses, which many of you are probably not even aware of the beach houses, but they are the farthest stretch away from the main campus. They're all the way out right at the beach of the Bay of Bengal. And so you see here, this is the road that leads all the way back. If you kept going like that, you would be at the entrance to the Theosophical Society, the main entrance. Library and archives, you see. But way over here, at the edge of the property, there are these 6 really quite lovely houses, but because they're so far removed, they have been places that have not really been desirable for many people to live. It's secluded, but at the same time, it's something where it borders on, you know, another community that is here. So what we're going to do is we're going to upgrade those beach houses and make them more than sufficient. We're going to make them quite desirable as housing. Again, quite a bit of nature that we'll have to be in contact with, but beautiful structures. Parsi quarters. Many of you will know that most recently the Parsi quarters, up until Radha Burnier's passing, this was her home. The building since that time has been unoccupied. I don't know if you're aware, but on the campus at the Theosophical Society, when I got there, there had been an inventory done of buildings, or supposedly there had been an inventory, and we had about 86 buildings of various types on the campus, not all of them residences. When McKeel came, he, and at that time, Helma, his wife, came with him, and they did a renewed inventory to find that we have over 110 buildings on the property. Many of them are structures that were built for a purpose at the time. As our function changed, they were no longer needed. So many of the buildings, nature would do us a favor to reclaim them. So that's okay. Some of the buildings are residences. We have about 100 people living on the campus. But we have a number of buildings that are not used. And it's a funny thing about how these buildings work. You can renovate a building, but if nobody lives in that building, what you find is that it will very quickly deteriorate. So in the absence of a suitable purpose for the renovation, we have decided just to hold for a while. But this is such a beautiful building. What we're contemplating doing is taking Parsi quarters. Obviously this building was named, it was built out of respect to Parsi religion. So you see some of the symbols. Inside, it's a beautiful building. So this is just a very rough sketch of an idea for this place that actually we can make it into 4 separate units. So really small apartment units. And this could be something for people who are coming for a more extended stay. People who would want to come and would need kitchen facilities of their own. People who would need a space that is perhaps air-conditioned, acclimatized in that way. So we'll develop it in that way so that people will have that level of thought where I can come for an extended stay. I can stay there for a year, for 2, for 6 months. And this would be a very good place for that. Vasanta Guest House. Right now, the Vasanta Press is where all of the publications of the Theosophical Society used to be printed. We still print a lot of them. Again, this dates back to the time when publication was an exceedingly labor-intensive activity. There were more than 100 people staffing this place when it was built for the production of books, magazines, pamphlets. Obviously, as digital means have become the way of the present, all of the need for the very large presses has evaporated. And so back maybe 30 years ago, 20 to 30 years ago, the staffing of 100 went very quickly down to maybe 20 people. And it's gone to less than that now because a lot of it we outsource. So this is a space that is a beautiful space. Again, the Theosophical Publishing House is operating out of a portion of it. So the idea is that perhaps this could become a place where you could have guest houses. This, I have to say, is one of McKeel's pet projects. I told him I was going to do my best to reflect his enthusiasm, but I will leave it for you to make your own decision. Tunnel project. Now the idea is this, that basically we have 2 sides to the campus with Besant Avenue running in between. Back when the Theosophical Society was the only thing going on that side of the Adyar River, Besant Avenue did not divide the property. Now it does. So we have the issue of, in communicating physically and going between one place and the other, we need to continually cross that busy byway. So a solution to that, build a tunnel. So right near the South Gate, where the information center is, where ATA is, McKeel has the concept, and he's looked into how it can be done, build a tunnel underneath. This is to show just how happy you will be going through that tunnel. So imagine yourself leaping like that, and also imagine yourself becoming so young just by stepping into a tunnel. But this is the concept, and these are things that are very commonly and easily done now. Basically, you uncover the road one day, set this in, cover the road back, and this is what you have, a psychedelic tunnel. So anyway, that's a thought. Again, I always encourage McKeel and the people who are working on the project to think outside of the box. This is one of those thoughts. This is one that is not outside of the box. But we're trying to go toward with the installation of solar panels, for instance, at Leadbeater Chambers. You have a situation where there is a certain obvious need in the world, that energy consumption is extreme and it cannot be continued at the pace at which we are choosing to continue for our comforts. And yet at the same time, people are not willing to sacrifice their comforts in order to remain energy consistent. So electricity is one thing, but then also, what about all of the waste that we pour back into the various systems of the world? So the idea here is that there are technologies. And again, when we think of technology, we always seem to think that it's some newly invented device. What this technology involves is plants and field to clean the waste. And it's not just a visionary idea. It is visionary, but it's something that's completely operative in places around the world now. It's called a hilophyte filter. So basically, the water comes in, the wastewater comes in, the grease is filtered out, the grease-free water passes on, is then pumped into this field with certain plants, plants that are easy to grow in India and elsewhere in the world, are planted, and the remaining filtration takes place through passing the water through this plant field, which also has soil of specific types as a filter. So what comes up the other end and then either flows into the Adyar River is a purified water. We can also utilize that water for other purposes within the building, for bathing or perhaps even for watering plants. So this is something that we're looking into now, so that for the finished product at Leadbeater Chambers, this will be the way that the wastewater is dealt with. This is an example of just such a field built outside of a building. I think this is in the Netherlands. So this is the end result. I mean, obviously, when you're talking about a campus such as ours, there is no end. It will always be a work in progress. But ideally, we would be able to reach a point where the estate is fully renovated. I do have to say, 6 years ago, on first coming to the campus and looking at things that were in need there, one of the needs was that where our residents and workers and volunteers were staying, there was not a house to be found where, when it rained, you had to bring out buckets in those very familiar spots where the water would drip through. And that was in everyone's home. To my mind, again, I have the problem of a certain way of seeing things. But to my mind, that's not a maintenance issue. Obviously, there's maintenance that's required. The fact that conditions were as they were, and you had a capacity to do better than that, which we do, that's not a maintenance issue. That's an issue related to our own minds, and it's something that, to me, is not in keeping with a theosophical approach. So that was one of the first things that we addressed. Before we do major renovation on the campus, people will not be rained on. That's pretty simple. So no deferred maintenance is the idea. We're doing all of this renovation. We're not doing the renovation to have it destroyed by our own inaction. So a self-supporting estate. So zero carbon footprint is another of our goals. Another thing I should say, on our campus, as you all know, we have walkers, we have visitors that come in. Very frequently, there is, prior to Swachh Bharat, the concept of a certain sort of non-littering mind was not that prevalent. And so on our campus, people would come, and if they had a candy bar, they would eat without even thinking. The paper went on the ground. If they had to drink coffee, paper went on the ground. So we were cleaning up after people. And it was something of a complaint. But when you look around the campus, you find that at no point were we providing garbage cans, trash bins. And yet we expect of others a certain respect that we don't even assist them in arriving at. That's, again, is our fault, not theirs. So now, of course, we have garbage cans all over the campus, and people are expected, required, to deposit their trash in those. And it's become the habit. And, of course, a financially self-supporting estate. So, again, to close, here is the idea. All of the things that we have to do will require work and hard work. But the results make the work a lot easier. It makes it a joyful exercise. The dreams, as I say, what we're asking for now is what's impossible. So if you can get bigger than that, I want to hear it. And again, even though whatever it is that you undertake may seem difficult, the idea is that we don't give up. This whole theosophical endeavor is probably the most difficult thing if we really look at it correctly. We're talking about the regeneration of humanity. It doesn't get much more difficult than that. So to have a campus that's renovated really is small in terms of the things we need to do. So this is the presentation. I want to thank especially Michiel Haas and others. All of the information about the ongoing renovation, about ways that you can become involved, you will find on the Elephants renovation website. Again, that's where you'll find it. So the news is constantly there. There's a newsletter. If you sign on, you'll get them regularly. Thank you.